everybody. So excited to have you guys back for our last and final episode of the Comma season. I have a very special guest. You guys are not ready. She is about to drop all the gems for you. Lolita Taub of Ganas Ventures, a Latina woman who is killing it in venture capital. Like, I don't even have words to say all of the praise that you have gotten behind the scenes. When I spoke to you the first time, I was on my journey as a person who had just gotten laid off. I was doing basically at Truist, and I was a VP of innovation strategy and got laid off. And I was talking to Lolita and basically trying to figure out what my next step was. And lo and behold, I got hit over the head with an idea that I had challenges with over and over again, right? And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to being an entrepreneur. So this conversation is so helpful for me and anybody else who is out there, who is an entrepreneur, who wants to understand what that journey looks like, what you should be doing to prepare yourself to be venture backable, because very different from small, medium businesses to venture backable businesses. And Lolita is going to take us through that journey. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, Sequoia, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Super proud and excited for you to be on your next chapter and happy to help however I can.
Thank you. So happy to have you too. So let's jump into this. So before we get into the knit and grit of how do you make your business venture backable and defensible and all the things, let's really dive into your journey to becoming a venture capitalist, especially as a Latino woman, because we don't see that a lot. So what was that like for you?
I mean, honestly, I think life takes you on a journey that you don't really know what direction you're going to go. I liked a long time ago, I heard Sheryl Sandberg talk about it's not a ladder, but a jungle gym that you're climbing up. And I think in life, that is what it is. And so one thing leads to another. And here we are a decade later. Actually, I've been in the workforce for over 15 years. So almost like closer to 20 years in the making, right? But so I start my journey as a child of immigrants coming from Mexico, so first generation. We came from very humble beginnings. So the whole concept of venture capital was not in my vocabulary. I did not know what it was, but I did know that I needed to work hard, go to school, get a good paying job, a good 9 to 5, et cetera, et cetera. After college, I ended up working at IBM and then Cisco. And through that journey, in achieving the American dream, which is a whole topic on its own, I actually did a project where I interviewed 100 women founders. And what I noticed in all of them, they were tech founders. They were having a really hard time raising capital. And at this time, again, I had no idea what venture capital was. I'm, set in my career in corporate big tech. And all of a sudden I see these women, they have great ideas. And I am just baffled by, so baffled that I'm baffled by the fact that they can't get funding. And so from that point on, I started digging into why that was, what the ecosystem was. And I decided that I wanted to write checks to women. And that started a really long journey. That's now, I guess I'm in my 8th year. It took that long to get to where I am within the venture capital side of things. So I went from big tech to startups to then venture capital. So my first step was not jumping into venture capital because it was incredibly hard. It's still incredibly hard to get into venture capital. So I went and worked in Silicon Valley, New York, and all sorts of different places, really understanding more of what is the startup ecosystem, what is the venture capital community, angel investing, and all of those things. And through that journey, I quite frankly realized, like, okay, I don't have the money to invest. So this idea of investing my own money, you have to be accredited to invest. You have this, you need X, Y, Z. And I said, I came from South Central. I am the matriarch of my family. I don't have money and I don't even qualify to invest. So what do? I started hearing about venture capital and then digging in deeper. The women who were getting funding, they were having these crazy experiences that, I just could not believe in sexism and just sexual harassment and all of this. And more of a reason that it made me think, you know what, I need to go through venture capital because that's where you take other people's money and you invest it in great companies. And I thought, look, I have access to all these great founders and I want to back them. Then I went down Silicon Valley and wanted to see where I could get hired at a venture capital fund. And no one wanted to hire me. They were like, you don't have the profile, you don't have the pedigree that we want to see. You don't have XYZ. You don't belong here, basically. But I decided I'm still gonna go for it. Did my MBA. I actually got my first venture capital job while I was in Spain, doing my MBA at IE Business School. And that allowed me to then bridge into venture capital here in the US. And Arlen Hamilton, I have to say, of Backstage Capital was the first venture capitalist that really opened the door for me to come into the world of venture capital in the US. And that started this whole journey that now, this is my second fund, Ganas Ventures. My first one was the community fund. And this one is investing in pre-seed and seed community-driven companies in the US and Latin America. So long journey. There's so many other in-between stories, but that's how I got here.
I love that. Arlen has been the pinnacle of so many careers. It's so
Yes,
amazing.
she has.
Yeah. So with that, when you started investing or looking at these deals, I had a company 10 years ago, it's 2014. Crazy. It's over a decade. It's time flies, right? So I had gotten that company venture backed. I didn't know that it was so difficult because the way that it happened for me was not difficult, right? Like I went through this program, Draper University, and then I raised out of Draper. So when I got out back into the world, because you're in this siloed bubble for a very long time, like 7 weeks, but it feels like forever, right? Because you're working 24/7 around the clock, getting prototyping, whatever you're doing. When I got out, I was like, wait, this is a huge disparity. Like I had no idea. So when you started seeing those companies and the women who are coming to you and telling you these stories, what was your immediate reaction to that?
I mean, first, I saw a lot of opportunity that was being overlooked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is true, underestimation, underrepresentation, they all impact where capital flows and where it doesn't. And so there was a lot of founders that I started seeing that I wanted to back. But there were also a lot of founders who were not the right fit for venture capital. And I think we are going to talk about that in a little bit. There's no right or wrong in terms of do you take venture capital money or do you bootstrap? It's really all about, coming back and thinking about what business are you building in what market? How big is it? Like just even that alone. If the industry or the solution you're building for, if the market is not larger than $1 billion, you cannot build a unicorn. So that kind of disqualifies a lot of startups. But as soon as you go above that, there's still a question of do you bootstrap or do you raise venture capital? And so in any case, I started seeing a lot of founders in our community, and my whole career has really been guided by supporting, backing underrepresented founders, women, starting with women, people of color, LGBTQ, so on and so forth. And what I notice is this. There's a question of how do I get venture capital money that really should start at should I, and what am I trying to build? The other thing is that I noticed that there was a lot of foundational education that was missing. So I started actually writing a lot of content. And that actually indirectly, without me even thinking about it, started building my brand, and my community, which is what helped me build a fund where we raised and will continue to invite the community to invest in Ganas Ventures. And so in any case, I started writing content to help on the foundational level because I didn't, even though maybe venture capital wasn't right for a lot of startups, I didn't want them to feel neglected or marginalized because oftentimes that's what happens. And I think our community needs to have basic education in a way that's accessible and isn't like rocket science. And so put together some content. The next thing was investors were on the other side saying, hey, there isn't enough of a pipeline to invest in these founders. So what do you do? And this is where, Arlen and I really aligned. And that's why I was so excited to work at Backstage. And I said, no, there's no problem. And along the journey, what I ended up building with my husband is the Startup Investor Matching Tool, which connects underestimated, underrepresented founders with investors to address this concept of there's a pipeline problem, and there isn't. So after several years, there's been companies that have raised over $10 million on this free platform. And so I think education and connection is really important. But in between, does it make sense? Does it not? And if it does, then let's think through what are the questions, what are the documents, what's the preparation to raise successfully?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I love that you guys created that matching tool. I'm creating my data room right now. So let's go through some of that. Let's drill down. So we said 10 billion or 1 billion for you all, 10 billion, typically unicorn. What else do we need to be looking for venture backable businesses? Like what, as a founder, what should I consider in order before I even look to approach a venture capitalist?
Yeah, I love this question. So again, I would start with what is my fundraising strategy? Why am I raising would be the first question. What do I need the money for? And asking different questions like what kind of business do I want to build? Is it one where I organically grow and I bootstrap, and bootstrapping equals like actually taking capital from your customers because customers' cash is king, you know? And especially in an economic situation that we find ourselves in this market, it's gotten even harder to raise, right? So what should you do and why? It becomes so important. And when you're talking to venture capitalists, we want to really understand why. So if you want to, you have a business that is in a billion plus, dollar market, then VC is an option. Now, if VC is your option, it's also like not something you need to choose. So like I said, if you want to grow something organically, venture capital is not for you. Do you want to grow fast? Venture capital may be for you. If you want to grow slowly, not for you. Do you want to eventually sell or exit your business? If yes, then venture capital could be for you. If not, then maybe not. And the good thing about this whole thing is that you could always decide to start bootstrapping and then go into venture capital if you're not quite sure. Because as soon as you take venture capital money, VCs, our whole job is to make money for our LPs, our investors, right? And so the clock is ticking for us and we need to show returns because if we don't, then that's the end of our career. And so there's these different pulls and levers that you need to think about and what you want, what's available. And then once you do go down the VC path, I would say one of the first things, especially in early stage, because it really depends where your company is if you're raising venture capital. For us, where we focus on pre-seed and seed, and I've also done angel investing in the past. Now I'm just strictly investing through Ganas, but I've invested in over 100 companies now. And one of the things that I would say is different investors may look for different and prioritize different things based on their thesis and so on and so forth. The first thing is on the VC side is what is your industry? What stage are you? How much money are you raising? These factors can actually help you create a target list of venture capitalists that are actually aligned with your business. And so for us, for example, Ganas Ventures, we're investing pre-seed and seed community-driven companies in the US and Latin America. If you do not check all those boxes to begin with, we're not going to be a fit. We also don't invest in physical products. We want to make sure you're a corporate Delaware C Corp or a Cayman sandwich with Delaware LLC situation. So
Wait, can
there's
I
always,
pause you for a second?
yeah,
What is that? I read that in your tag at the end of your email, and I was like, I've never heard of this Cayman Island Delaware C Corp.
yeah.
How does that work?
So this is for our community that's in Latin America more
Oh,
specifically.
okay, okay.
Because what happens is Delaware C Corp is the US standard and typically also globally accepted by a lot of venture capital funds because it limits liability and it has tax implications if it's anything else. And so you're really protecting your limited partners. The Cayman Holding Delaware LLC combo is more or less the equivalent of the Delaware C Corp. And what is beneficial for Latin American founders in this position when they're thinking of corporate structure is if they're going to only operate in Latin America, why would you create a Delaware C Corp where if you do exit, you're going to have to pay the US government your taxes and versus Cayman holding with Delaware LLC. So another whole conversation, but yeah, so coming back, one thing I would say is once you know VC good, the market is good, you want to grow, all these things. Now, one of the things that for me is really important is what is the team? Who are they as human beings, especially in early stage? What is driving them to solve this problem? Is it something that they're maniacally obsessed over solving for? Big problems that need big solutions, and more specifically also that the market is willing to actually pay for a solution. Because sometimes there's these great ideas, but people are like, yeah, that's a nice to have. It's not a need to have. And this is where that analogy of vitamin versus aspirin comes in. And for those of you who are new to this, the vitamin is basically something that is good for you to take, but you might forget about it. You may skip it. You might just not do it altogether. Whereas if you have a headache, you're going to want to take that aspirin right away because you want it to go away. So you want an aspirin type of business, right? The other thing that I think about is the market growing? Like outside of just the demand, market growth, where's it trending, the market demand, and then the team. It's so important to know that the team has industry knowledge, they have the business expertise in it, they have the tech side of things, right? They're able to sell. These are all really important things. Now, this could be in a couple of people, could be more than a couple of people. When you're just getting started, though, it may just be you. So how do you fit this if you're raising a pre-seed? Well, part of it is having this conversation about going back to the question, why are you raising? Well, the answer could be, I am raising to hit this, first traction milestone and also bring in these team members who are right now volunteering, etc. Right? So you're basically building a story around why you're raising, who you are, how you're the best team to succeed in solving the big problem. And then being really, for us, it's also really important to be really driven and show that you can do more with less, because oftentimes, if not 100% of the time, that's what the startup world is like, and having that grit. The last thing I'll say for us is this is the people business. So when I think about before, doing the due diligence and all of that, which we can get into data room specific questions if you want, but I always ask myself, would I want, or rather, would I be okay being in an elevator, stuck in an elevator, and this person farts or this team farts? Like, would I be okay? Like, would I be like, no, I'm just not gonna, I can't even imagine that. Because, it's just to speak to the level of like, I really believe in this team. Let's invest and let's be on this journey together as humans and as business people.
I so love that analogy. That is hilarious to me. Me and my co-founder, we've known so we both started at Draper. He had a different business. He went through an accelerator. Adam has a blockchain accelerator, or I don't know what it is now, but at that time it was all Bitcoin, blockchain, and that whole gamut. So we've known each other for 10 years, but not as partners, right? So how important do you think it is for them to have a work together versus like just knowing and having built a relationship over time?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, ideally, you've worked together. And here's why, because you want to de-risk on the investor side, you want to de-risk an investment. And so if people have worked together, there's this assumption that you're likely going to be okay, because a lot of companies do break down because of co-founder conflict. And so it's ideal, but is it, in my opinion, like the thing that's gonna make investors pass? I think it's hard to say because it's more of a holistic picture when you're looking through due diligence. Again, you're doing the market research, the SWOT analysis, the what, do we really believe this is going to be moving the needle? Not just like, is it going to make something 2 times better, but rather, is this going to be a global movement? Is it really going to grow this big? Does it have the potential to grow really quickly with this team, with where they are, everything? So it's just all a cohesive due diligence process that you look at different things.
I love that. So good. So with your journey and your experience, how has being a Latin woman impacted you?
I mean, you probably can guess. I think whether you're Latina or not, but you are a person of color or anyone who's not a cisgendered white male who comes from privilege. I think there are just challenges to be had, right? There's nepotism, there's I invest in people who look like me, from like a fund perspective, right? So LPs into funds, funds into founders. So it's this whole chain. It's not just, so who invites people into this whole community? That's the biggest thing, right? Who opens the door? Who pulls up the chair? As you mentioned, Arlen is a big, has had big impact in bringing so many of us into the fold and opening the door, pulling a chair for us. We need more of that, right? And when you don't have that, that's where you start getting these questions and interviews like, and tell me about your imposter syndrome. I'm like, well, you're assuming that there's imposter syndrome,
Right.
but can we talk about the, systematic, marginalizing systems that we have in place? And like, it's things from all the way to, it's less about the ethnicity and more even socioeconomic, right? Like starting a fund, if there's an assumption and a requirement for you to put some percentage of the fund into the fund from your own personal wealth,
where's it coming from?
and you don't have money, right? And then also like, oh, you want to do things differently. For us, our big thing is investing in bold founders, but they have to have this go-to community aspect to it. So all of a sudden it's like, well, so social impact, that's what you invest in. And I'm like, no, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean there's social impact. It could potentially be, but that's not our thesis, right? It has to do with actually my background in sales and an understanding that if you mobilize the audience that you are serving, the audience that you're solving problems for, and help them create value amongst each other, create that space for them, and then help them easily enable this marketing and sales flywheel, that will help you create your product, sell it, and scale it. Like that's our thing. But you have all of these biases, some unconscious, some very conscious ones. And right now, I mean, again, less about being a Latina and just in general, we're facing this interesting time where DEI is a dirty word. And being woke has been dragged through the mud. So I think politicians are and the society, I don't know. I don't even like, I'm still digesting how to look at all of the things that are unfolding before us. But I think what's most important is to know, yeah, it is hard. It will probably be hard all of our life, but what can we do to be successful? And our job is to be successful. I want to see you be successful, Sequoia. And you can become a VC in the future, or, so on and so forth. We just need to support each other in the community. And that's exactly, for example, why for us at Ganas, we really wanted to bring in, accept smaller checks for the fund and bring in diversity into the community, because so many of us are not participating in venture capital or participating or even thinking that, hey, we also can be investors, we also can be founders, and this is how. And we need to not come from a place of lack, but a place of abundance. I can't tell you how many times I've heard founders say, "I need you to, sign an NDA before I share it." Like, no, like, look, I understand why there's mistrust. The system has messed us up from that level, like trusting people hard. But in this world, it's all about trusting that you're putting yourself out there. You're going to be the best. You're going to take what comes at you and work through it if you're really passionate about solving something. And so again, that passion is really important, the human element of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said, so I had an angel syndicate 2 years ago, and I had this had this very audacious idea.
Yeah.
I was like, I am going to get, so I'm like, there's all of these unicorn companies with these outsized returns that we as people of color have no access to as LPs, right? So I was like, I'm going to get all people of color, mostly Black people at that time, to basically become LPs into the syndicate. And then we invest into these unicorn companies because I had deal flow still out of Silicon Valley. Oh my God. The idea was great. Execution, because to your point earlier, our knowledge of venture capital is so absent. Like time horizon, 5 to 7 years. They're like, no, we want our money next week. I'm like, I cannot help you there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to not just educate from the entrepreneur side, but from the LP side, because
Yes.
that's essentially how you're going to get these exits, these liquidity events where you get these returns, right? So how have you been helping the community, educating the community from the LP side in terms of investing into the fund? Or do you do that? Do you allow?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. So kind of like I started the content creation for founders in our community, I started doing similar things for LPs. So
Okay.
really breaking it down. But at the end of the day, investing in a fund is like putting your money in a little metal box, digging a hole in your backyard if you have one, or in a pot. I don't know, like if we don't have space anymore. Anyway, putting it in there and then coming back 10 years later to see that it's vanished or it's multiplied. Right? So at the end of the day, that's what it really is. And you're trusting that, the soil that you're putting it into, the fund manager is going to do their very best to create returns. Now, our community, in my opinion, is super motivated because A, from day one, everyone's like, they're probably going to fail. Number two, we are hungry to build, to win. We have that great, we're not like laying back and being like, well, I guess I'll just, hang out and go skiing and go on my jet and on my yacht. And well, like, I mean, at least that's not my background. That's not what's happening. So this hunger is really important. So understanding the dynamic from where we are as people is something that motivates some investors, but it comes down to like the business of making money and having this confidence that our community can also build wealth. We could do it together. Let's invest in us. I mean, what I find so interesting, because we invest in both the US and Latin America, is that a lot of the time, Latin American LPs don't want to invest in funds that invest in Latin America. They want outside of Latin America because they're just like, I'm not sure I believe in this. Since we opened up, since there's like, I spent over a year in Latin America living in all the different hottest startup hubs, also created guides for each so that founders and investors can learn more about their ecosystem, and just kind of aggregated some of it with the community. Like these were all community driven content posts too. We're starting to see more funds say, hey, like let's invest in Latin America. But having said so, there are also a lot of funds who are saying, hey, we're Latin American funds investing in Latin Americans in the US. And it's this very interesting thing. And I think we just need to step back and be like, all right, guys, like colonization really got to us. But like seriously, we can all build great businesses and make a lot of money. And
Right.
investing where others are not seeing those diamonds in the rough
Right.
is
The
where
gaps.
the money is at.
Yep. Yep. Oh my gosh. So good. So good. Well, Lolita, I know we're coming up on time, but this has been an amazing conversation. Any gems or words of wisdom that you want to leave to founders who are on their journey or even investors who want to be the next Lolita? What words of wisdom would you leave to them?
I would say accepting that we just need to continuously learn, continuously grow, and that it's uncomfortable to be in this world. Just knowing why you're doing what you're doing and knowing the reality of where we sit and having that curiosity of continuous learning, that's the thing we need to do. And I mean, realize that there are bold founders to back and that the strength of community is something that we can rely on. And it is so powerful. It could build us up and it could build and open bigger doors than we even ever thought was possible.
So good. Thank you so much for your time.